this is Kaylin. I will talk about the necessary skills that you need before applying for a guide dog. I hope that this will help inform you as to whether you are ready to apply for a guide dog and what you need to work on before you begin this process. If you have not watched my video on the application requirements for applying for guide dog school, then please watch that first, because in this video I expand upon the orientation and mobility topic that I brought up in that video. So for those who are not familiar, orientation and mobility training is a service that most blind people receive at some point in their life. This is a crucial service that teaches us how to travel independently in a variety of different circumstances. They can include everything from cane training to traveling outdoors and route planning, to crossing streets safely, to use of public transit, to understanding the address labeling system of your native city. All those things are super important, and orientation mobility training kind of covers all of them. So very, very crucial, but it is also extremely important in this application process and when you are functioning as a guide dog user. I'm going to start with describing a little bit about my application process and where my orientation and mobility training was important. First, they had me make a video as a part of my initial online application that was basically filming me walk a route in my local area. I chose to walk home from school. In the video, I walked from my school to the bus stop, which involved 2 different street crossings, one in a quite busy area of the city. And then I took the Chicago CTA bus, and I took it to my local bus stop. I got off, and then I crossed a whole bunch of streets in order to get home from there. And I chose to have my mobility instructor, my orientation and mobility instructor, record this. I happened to be in high school at the time, so he was provided by my high school, and he offered to do that for me. If he was not available, or if I was not currently receiving orientation and mobility training, a family, friend, or anyone could totally do that. This video both demonstrates my ability to use a cane, my ability to orient myself, my ability to cross streets, and use public transit all in one. So essentially, it was a very, very good assessment of my mobility skills. The next opportunity for them to assess it was during a home visit. A part of my school's process was that they had, after I was accepted in the online application phase, which included that video, they sent a person out to my house to meet me and to have a whole bunch of discussion, and part of it was that she assessed my mobility skills walking around my local area. I showed her the way to my gym, I showed her the way to Target. We had a little walk and talk. I explain more about this in another video. But essentially, you will be assessed at all points of this application process to make sure that you know how to use your cane, that you know how to route plan, and that you are comfortable traveling in your native environment. That said, a lot of these skills are very, very important when you get to training, but the route planning part of it becomes a little bit less crucial. You do have to learn, at least in my particular experience, I was required to learn several different routes during my time at training. That said, they had a lot of resources, including like these beautiful pieces of wall art where you could feel the routes, and tons of instructor help, and we walked them with a cane on our first day before we got our dogs. So there was a ton of support, and even then, you're often so distracted trying to learn how to use your new dog, especially as a first-time dog user, that the routes are kind of the least of your concern, and the instructors totally understood that. It's helpful if you know the route and if you can learn it, but I often forgot, and the instructors were always just like, oh, you're supposed to take your turn now. Like, they were very, very chill about it, so I definitely don't think that that's your biggest concern. I will say that as a cane traveler compared with a guide dog traveler, mobility skills are very important in both situations, but with a guide dog, there's just a little bit less room for error. With a cane, you have a lot more opportunity because you're typically walking a lot slower, you're feeling more things, there are more landmarks. With a guide dog, you're trusting your dog's intuition, and they may give you clues that you wouldn't get with a cane, but they also may be very dependent on your decisions and your instructions, especially if they're new to that route, that if you aren't super good at orienting yourself, at keeping aware of your route, and at your route planning, it's a lot easier to get lost, at least in my personal opinion. So, long story short, orientation and mobility, or O&M training, is super, super important. And if you have any issues with any of the things that I talked about in this video, I definitely recommend booking in a few orientation and mobility sessions, either through an organization for the blind or whatever resources that you have available. I will be making an additional video that talks about how to get access to orientation and mobility resources, at least in Chicago. But please look into that before you decide to apply for a guide dog. So, awesome! Thank you so much for watching.